He had to marry the town's ugliest girl. She revealed the most radiant heart he'd ever seen. Our man grew up in a small, quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. The streets were narrow, lined with old houses that had stood for generations. Life here was simple, but tradition weighed heavily on everyone. From a young age, Armin had been taught about duty, honor, and respect for family wishes. He was a bright and cheerful young man known for his honesty and helpful nature, and everyone in the town admired him. But despite his popularity, Armin had always dreamed of choosing his own path, of making his own decisions, especially when it came to matters of the heart. One afternoon, as he was walking home from work at the small local shop where he helped his father, his mother called him inside. Her voice was serious, and Armin immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Inside the modest living room, his parents sat across from him, their faces drawn with concern. His father, a stern but caring man, cleared his throat before speaking. "Armin, it's time for you to think about marriage," he said, trying to sound calm, though there was an edge of urgency in his voice. Armin frowned slightly. He had been aware of this possibility, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. "I know, Baba," he replied gently. "I was hoping to wait a little longer to find someone I truly feel for." His mother, usually gentle and soft-spoken, looked at him with a mix of worry and determination. "Armin, sometimes life doesn't give us the luxury of waiting," she said. "This is not just about you. It's about family, about respect, and about the promises we make to our community." Armin's heart sank. He understood the weight of family expectations. In their town, arranged marriages were not unusual, but his parents' words hinted that this was different. It wasn't just any proposal. His father leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "The girl's family has requested the match. She is a kind and respectful girl, and her family has always been good to us. It is our duty to accept this proposal." Armin's mind raced. He had heard the whispers in town, the cruel jokes people made in hushed voices, the way they would call her the ugliest girl in town. Her name was Sana. Even without meeting her, Armin had already been tainted by the town's opinion. He felt a mix of frustration, confusion, and fear. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he also didn't want to marry someone he couldn't see himself loving. That evening, as he walked through the streets, Armin thought about what he had just heard. Children played in the dusty roads, their laughter echoing off the walls of old buildings. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery mixed with the earthy scent of the river nearby. He tried to focus on the beauty around him, but his thoughts kept returning to Sana. He had never spoken to her, never seen her face clearly, yet he already felt the pressure of expectations pressing down on him. The next day, his parents arranged a meeting. Armin's stomach twisted as he walked up the narrow path to Sana's house. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed how quiet it was, how different the atmosphere felt from the bustling streets outside. Sana was sitting in the corner of the room, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked up and smiled at him, a simple, unassuming smile that carried no arrogance or pretense. Armin was taken aback. She didn't look as he had imagined. Not ugly, but not strikingly beautiful either. She had an ordinary face, with soft features and clear, honest eyes. Yet there was something about her posture, her calmness, that made him pause. She didn't try to impress him, didn't act out of fear or vanity. She was just herself. The meeting was brief and conversation flowed awkwardly at first. Armin stumbled over polite questions about her family, her daily life, and her interests. Sana answered softly but with clarity, her voice steady and warm. She spoke of her love for reading, of the small garden she tended, of the joy she found in helping her neighbors. Armin listened, surprised by how sincere and thoughtful she was. It was nothing like the cruel image painted by the town gossip. As he walked back home, Armin couldn't stop thinking about her. The town might have labeled her harshly, but he could see that Sana carried herself with dignity, kindness, and quiet strength. He realized that the people who laughed and whispered never truly knew her. They only knew how to judge by appearances. And Armin wondered for the first time if he might be the same as them. In the days that followed, Armin tried to keep his distance. He wanted to think clearly, to weigh his feelings against his sense of duty.
But every time he passed Sanna's house, he noticed small things, the way she waved politely to neighbors, the way she smiled at children playing in the street, the way she greeted even the poorest of visitors with warmth. He began to understand that there was a kind of beauty in her that no one else seemed to see, a beauty that went far beyond what the eyes could capture. The town, however, continued its gossip. Friends whispered, neighbors stared, and strangers occasionally snickered. "He's going to marry Sanna?" they would ask, their voices filled with disbelief. "Why would anyone choose her?" At first, Armin felt embarrassed and frustrated. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them that they were wrong, that they didn't know her. But he held back, knowing that the opinions of shallow minds would not help him make the decision that truly mattered. One evening, as he sat alone in his room, Armand reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. He thought about his dreams, his ambitions, and the life he had imagined for himself. And then he thought about Sanna, the way she had looked at him with kindness, the way she had spoken with honesty, and the quiet courage she had shown in a world that judged her harshly. Slowly, he began to realize that perhaps this arranged marriage, which had seemed like a burden at first, might be something entirely different. Armand decided to give himself time to truly understand her. He wanted to meet her again, to talk to her without the town's judgment clouding his mind. He wanted to see if the warmth he had glimpsed in her was real, if the kindness he had noticed was consistent. More than anything, he wanted to discover whether the girl the town called ugly might have a heart that could change the way he saw the world. Over the next few weeks, Armin and Sanna met often. They would talk for hours about simple things, books, daily chores, dreams for the future. Sanna's voice was always calm, always patient, and she had a way of making ordinary conversations feel meaningful. Armin began to notice small gestures, the way she remembered what he liked to drink, the way she laughed quietly at his jokes, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved. Each encounter made him think differently. The more he saw of Sanna, the more he realized that the town's labels were meaningless. People judged quickly and harshly, but they rarely understood the true essence of a person. Armin found himself respecting her strength, admiring her courage, and feeling something unfamiliar in his chest, something gentle, quiet, and warm, that he had never felt for anyone before. By the time the first month had passed, Armin's initial reluctance had softened. He still struggled with the idea of marrying someone he hadn't chosen freely. But he was beginning to see that choice wasn't just about appearances or popularity. It was about character, about the heart, about who someone truly was.
And in Sanna, he had begun to find someone extraordinary, even if the world around them could not see it. Armand realized that his life was about to change in ways he could not yet predict.
The town would continue to gossip, the streets would continue to judge, and his family would expect him to follow tradition. But deep down, he knew that the girl he was meant to marry might teach him the greatest lesson of all, that true beauty is never measured by the eyes, but by the heart. And so, Armand faced the challenge with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. He had been asked to marry a girl the town called ugly, but he was beginning to understand that this girl, with her quiet dignity and radiant heart, might be the very person who could change his life forever after the initial meetings. Armand began spending more time with Sanna, cautiously at first, trying to see her beyond the town's harsh labels.
Each encounter revealed something new about her, something that challenged the judgments he had been warned about.
One morning, as the sun rose and cast golden light over the narrow streets of the town, Armand found himself walking toward Sanna's house with a mix of curiosity and a strange sense of anticipation. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the small gardens lining the road. Children laughed in the distance, chasing each other over the uneven stones, and the town slowly woke to its usual routine. When Armin arrived, Sanna was already outside, tending to the small garden she loved so much. She knelt beside the flower beds, her fingers gently brushing the soil as she planted new seeds. The sight was simple, yet it held a quiet beauty. She didn't notice him at first, absorbed in her work. But when she looked up and saw him, her face broke into a soft, welcoming smile. Her voice had a calmness that made him feel immediately at ease. "Good morning, Sanna," he replied, trying to mask the nervousness he felt. He wasn't sure why. Meeting her made his heart beat faster, but he couldn't deny it did. They spent the morning talking about ordinary things, the weather, the flowers in her garden, the chores that needed doing around her house. But even in these simple conversations, Armand noticed the extraordinary way Sana spoke. She listened carefully, never interrupting, and when she did speak, it was thoughtful and sincere. There was a depth in her words that he hadn't expected, a quiet wisdom that made him pause and reflect. As they talked, Armand began to notice her gestures. The way she laughed softly at small jokes, the way she offered him a piece of fruit from her basket without waiting to be asked, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about something she loved. It was as if she had a light inside her that shone quietly, undisturbed by the harsh opinions of the outside world. Over the next few weeks, their meetings became more frequent. Armand started to see that Sana's life was full of challenges that she met with courage and grace. Her family struggled to make ends meet, and she often helped her mother with the household chores, cared for her younger siblings, and assisted her neighbors whenever she could. She never complained, never sought recognition, and never asked for praise. Her generosity was natural, flowing from her heart rather than being performed for anyone else. Armand, who had once been reluctant to marry her, found himself admiring her more each day. He noticed that she had a way of making everyone feel valued. When she spoke to the townspeople, even the ones who had mocked her in the past, she was polite and kind. She never retaliated against unkind words or laughter, yet somehow people began to respect her quietly. Armand realized that this was a rare strength, a power that did not come from force or appearance, but from sincerity and warmth. One afternoon, as they walked together by the river that ran through the town, Armand asked her about her dreams. "Sana," he said hesitantly, "do you ever wish for a different life? A life where things were easier for you?" Sana looked at him thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting the gentle sunlight on the water.
"Of course I do," she replied softly.
But I have learned that life is not always about what is easy. It is about how we face what comes to us. I try to find joy in small things, to help where I can, and to treat everyone with kindness. That is the life I want to live."
Her words struck Armand deeply. He had grown up with the freedom to dream and plan, yet he had never understood the courage it took to face life with limited resources and still remain so positive. Sana's perspective was new to him, and it changed the way he thought about people in the world. He realized that while many sought beauty in appearances, the truest beauty lay in the way someone faced life, in the way they treated others, and in the light they carried within their hearts. Armand also began to notice the small acts of care that defined Sana's daily life. She helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, shared her food with children who had none, and comforted anyone who seemed lonely or sad. She never did this to show off or gain attention. It was simply who she was. Armand found himself thinking about her long after their meetings ended, remembering the warmth in her smile, the patience in her voice, and the light in her eyes. One evening, Armand returned home later than usual, feeling both joy and confusion. He couldn't understand why he had started looking forward to seeing Sana. He had entered this arrangement reluctantly, believing it was his duty, but now he found that he genuinely cared about the girl he had been told to judge. He wondered if it was possible to fall in love with someone he had initially considered reluctantly, someone the town had labeled unfairly. The thought made him smile and shake his head at the same time. Days turned into weeks, and Armand's feelings became clearer. He realized that Sana's appearance, which the town had mocked, was irrelevant. What mattered was the radiance of her heart, her sincerity, and her unwavering kindness. He began sharing his thoughts with her in small ways, complimenting her gardening, asking for her advice, or simply listening to her stories. Each interaction drew them closer, creating a bond built on understanding, respect, and gentle admiration. Sana, in turn, began to trust Armand more. She spoke to him openly about her hopes, her fears, and her past experiences. She shared the struggles she had faced growing up, the challenges her family endured, and the small joys that gave her life meaning. Armand listened, sometimes in silence, letting her words sink in. He realized that trust was not given lightly, and he felt honored that she chose to share her life with him. The town, however, continued its gossip. People whispered as they passed by, questioning the match, laughing at what they considered a misfortune. But Armin no longer felt embarrassed or pressured by their opinions. He had started to see the truth for himself, and he understood that the voices of judgment held no power over someone with a heart like Sana's. Each time he observed her kindness and patience, he felt a quiet pride in knowing that she would soon become part of his life. One afternoon, as they sat under a large tree near the edge of the town, Armin found the courage to speak openly. "Sana," he said, his voice steady but gentle, "I have to admit something. When I first heard about this arrangement, I was hesitant. I had so many doubts, and I judged before I truly knew you. But now I see that you are unlike anyone I have ever met. You are kind, brave, and thoughtful. And I respect you deeply." Sana looked at him, her expression calm but touched by emotion.
"Armin, I understand," she replied softly. "People often judge without knowing the whole story."
"I don't blame anyone for their opinions. What matters is what we know about ourselves and how we treat others."
Armin felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that this moment marked the beginning of something important, not just a marriage arranged by families, but a connection that was slowly forming between two people who genuinely cared for each other. He felt hope for the future, a hope that had been absent when he first learned of the arrangement. Over the following weeks, their bond continued to grow. Armin noticed that he no longer thought of the townspeople's whispers or judgments. Instead, he focused on the small joys they shared together, laughing while cooking simple meals, walking through the town streets in quiet conversation, helping with chores, and simply being present for each other. Each day revealed more of Sana's heart, and each day Armin found himself more captivated by her strength, warmth, and grace. Armin began to understand that love was not about appearances or superficial charm. It was about understanding, patience, shared experiences, and the ability to see the beauty within someone's character. Sana had taught him this without intending to. Through her actions, her words, and her presence, she had shown him that the heart was the true measure of a person. By the end of part 2, Armin was no longer the young man who had feared marrying the ugliest girl in town. Instead, he had begun to recognize Sana's brilliance, her kindness, and the quiet strength that made her extraordinary. He knew that the town's opinions were shallow and meaningless, and he felt a growing sense of gratitude that he had the chance to know someone whose heart was so radiant. For the first time, he began to look forward to the life they might build together. A life rooted not in appearances, but in the deep, lasting beauty of understanding, respect, and love. As the days passed, Armin and Sana's connection grew stronger. Their conversations became longer, more meaningful, and more personal. The initial awkwardness that had once existed between them had completely vanished. Armin found that he looked forward to every opportunity to meet her, to hear her voice, and to witness the warmth she spread in everything she did. Sana, in turn, began to trust Armin completely. She shared her thoughts freely, without fear of judgment, and he listened with genuine interest and care. One afternoon, Sana invited Armin to accompany her on a visit to a family in need on the edge of town. Their walk through the narrow, dusty lanes was filled with casual conversation, but Armin noticed the way Sana's eyes lit up when she saw the children playing outside. She greeted every passerby with a smile and a kind word. Even the shopkeepers who had once laughed at her now treated her with quiet respect. At the house they visited, an elderly woman struggled to carry water from the well to her home. Without hesitation, Sana stepped forward to help, filling the heavy buckets and carrying them inside. Armin followed, helping where he could, but it was Sana's calm determination and compassion that drew his attention. He watched her interact with the woman, listening patiently as she spoke, helping her organize her small home and offering food she had brought along. Armin realized that this was not an act done for recognition. This was the natural expression of who she was. On the walk back, Armin spoke softly, almost in a whisper, as if afraid his words might break the moment. "Sana, I've seen many people in this town, but I have never met anyone like you. You don't just help people, you truly care about them. It's inspiring." Sana looked at him with a calm smile. "I don't do it to impress anyone, Armin. she said gently.
It's simply how I feel. I grew up understanding that everyone struggles in their own way, and if I can make life a little easier for someone, I should. That's all. Armin felt a rush of admiration. Death to the turncoat!
He realized that her beauty was not something that could be seen in a mirror or judged by others. It was in her actions, her kindness, and the way she treated the world with compassion. The more he observed her, the more he understood that the town's opinion of her had been completely wrong. Over the following weeks, Armin began to open up more to Sana. He shared stories from his own childhood, his dreams for the future, and the fears he often kept hidden. Sana listened without judgment, offering thoughtful advice when he asked, and comforting words when he needed reassurance. She never imposed her thoughts or tried to dominate the conversation. Instead, she created a space where he could be honest and vulnerable. One evening, Armin found himself walking with Sana through the fields just outside the town. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange as the sun began to set. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and wildflowers. They sat on a small hill, watching the colors of the sky shift slowly. And for the first time, Armin allowed himself to speak his heart completely.
Sana, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I used to think that appearances mattered more than anything. I thought people's value could be seen in how they looked, how they dressed, or how others spoke about them. But I was wrong. I see now. I see that true beauty is something else entirely. It's the way you care, the way you live, the way you love. I think I'm beginning to understand what that means.
Sana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the setting sun.
Armin, she said softly, it is easy to get lost in what the world says, but the world does not know the heart of a person. Only we can understand our own hearts and the hearts of those we choose to truly see.
Her words resonated deeply within him. He realized that he had begun to see her for who she truly was, not the labels imposed by others, not the shallow judgments of the town, but her genuine self, her radiant heart that touched everyone around her. Armin felt a quiet gratitude and an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. As time went on, Armin and Sana began to work together on small projects in the town. They helped organize charity drives for struggling families, assisted elderly neighbors with daily chores, and spent afternoons teaching children to read and write. Armin noticed that wherever Sana went, she brought joy and hope. People who had once mocked her now smiled when she passed, sometimes offering help or kind words in return. Armin himself felt transformed. The girl he had once thought of reluctantly was now the person who taught him the most about life, kindness, and love. Her unwavering generosity and compassion opened his eyes to the superficiality of appearances and the power of the heart. He realized that in a world so full of judgment and gossip, Sana's courage and patience were extraordinary. One afternoon, they visited a small orphanage at the edge of town. Children ran up to greet them, laughing and shouting with joy. Sana knelt down to talk to each child individually, asking about their day, listening to their stories, and sharing little treats she had brought. Armin watched silently, moved by her patience and genuine care. He realized that her ability to see and nurture the goodness in others was what truly set her apart.
Later, as they walked home, Armin turned to her and said, Sana, I don't think I have ever met anyone like you. You see what others overlook and you care so deeply.
It's remarkable. Sana smiled, a soft, unassuming smile that carried warmth and humility.
We all have hearts that can give, she said simply. Sometimes we just need to choose to see the good in others and to act with kindness.
That is all I try to do. Armin felt a deep respect and admiration for her, but something else stirred within him, something tender and new. He realized that the affection he felt was growing into something far deeper than admiration. Her courage, her humility, and her unshakable kindness had begun to break down the walls he had built around his heart. He felt a quiet certainty that he wanted her to be part of his life in every way possible. One rainy evening, as the town streets glistened under the soft downpour, Armin and Sana took shelter under a large tree. The sound of raindrops falling around them was soothing, and the air was filled with the fresh, earthy scent of rain. Armin turned to her, feeling a mix of nervousness and clarity.
Sana, he said, I have learned so much from you. I see now what true beauty is. I see your heart, and it is more radiant than anything I could have imagined. I think I care for you more than I have ever cared for anyone." Sana looked at him quietly, her eyes filled with understanding and gentle warmth. She reached out, lightly touching his hand. "Arman," she said softly, "I have come to care for you as well. You have been patient, willing to see beyond what the world says, and you have learned to notice what truly matters. That is why I trust you, and that is why I believe in us." In that moment, Arman felt a deep sense of connection, a bond that went beyond appearances or obligation. He realized that the girl the town had called ugly was, in fact, the most extraordinary person he had ever met. Her heart had shown him the true meaning of love, compassion, and understanding. From that day onward, Arman began to see the world differently. He noticed the small acts of kindness that often went unseen, the quiet strength of people who faced hardship without complaint, and the beauty in hearts that radiated warmth and love. Sana had not only transformed his perception of her, but also his perception of the world. By the end of this period, Arman's feelings had completely shifted. The reluctance he had once felt was replaced by admiration, respect, and a budding love that was rooted in understanding and shared values. He knew that the bond they had formed was rare and precious, a connection built not on looks or superficiality, but on the depth of character and the beauty of the heart. As Part 3 concluded, Arman felt a quiet joy he had never experienced before. He looked forward to a future with Sana, a life where they would support each other, care for those around them, and continue to grow together. He realized that the girl he had been asked to marry had, in fact, revealed to him the most radiant heart he had ever seen, and in doing so, she had changed his life forever. The day of their wedding arrived quietly, without much fanfare, in the small town that had once whispered and laughed behind their backs. Arman woke early, a mixture of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. He looked around his modest room, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. From hesitation and doubt to admiration, respect, and now a deep love he had never expected to feel. His heart felt light, yet full, as if every small act of kindness from Sana over the past months had somehow prepared him for this day. Meanwhile, Sana was preparing in her own home, surrounded by her family. Her dress was simple yet elegant, reflecting her modest nature. She didn't need jewels or extravagance to shine. Her warmth, her grace, and the radiance of her heart were enough. She felt a quiet excitement, but there was also a calmness in her demeanor. This was not just a marriage arranged by families. It was a life she was about to build with someone who had learned to see her truly, someone who had come to value her heart above all else. When Arman arrived at her house, he felt a mixture of anticipation and awe. Sana greeted him with a smile that warmed him instantly, a smile that had become familiar and comforting over the past months. For the first time, the town's gossip, the judgmental glances, and the harsh whispers seemed to disappear. In that moment, all that mattered was the connection between them, the bond that had grown through time, patience, and understanding. The ceremony itself was simple, reflecting the modest traditions of the town. Friends and family gathered, offering blessings and smiles. Though some townspeople still looked on skeptically, many had already begun to notice the way Arman and Sana treated each other. With genuine care, respect, and quiet joy, they spoke in soft tones, laughed gently, and moved with a natural ease that could not be faked. It was clear to anyone watching that this was not a marriage of obligation, but a union built on understanding and admiration. As they exchanged vows, Arman felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought back to the first time he had met Sana, when he had been filled with doubt and reluctance. He remembered the whispers of the town, the cruel labels, and his own fear of marrying someone he had not chosen. And now, as he looked into her eyes, he realized how wrong all those judgments had been. He saw not the girl the town had called ugly, but the woman whose heart was the most beautiful he had ever known. Sana, too, felt a quiet joy. She remembered the days when people had laughed at her, when she had been judged for her appearance rather than appreciated for her kindness. And now, standing beside Airman, she realized that patience, perseverance, and a true heart could overcome even the harshest of judgments. She had waited not for approval, but for understanding, and she had found it in our man. After the ceremony, the newlyweds began their life together. At first, there were small adjustments, as with any new marriage.
They learned the rhythms of each other's days, discovered habits and preferences, and shared responsibilities. But what set them apart was the way they communicated, supported, and inspired one another. Armand, who had once been hesitant and unsure, now found confidence in the partnership they shared. He admired Sana's dedication, learned from her patience, and felt a growing love that deepened with each passing day. Sana, in turn, flourished in this new chapter of her life.
She had always been kind and giving, but now she found joy in sharing her life with someone who appreciated her fully.
She continued her work in the town, helping neighbors, teaching children, and supporting families in need. But now Armand was by her side. Together they made a team that was admired for their compassion, humility, and quiet strength. The town began to notice the change. People who had once whispered and laughed now spoke respectfully of Sana and Armand. They saw how the couple treated each other, how they supported those around them, and how much joy they brought to the community. Slowly, skepticism gave way to admiration.
Even those who had been the harshest critics began to understand that the true measure of a person was not in appearances, but in character and heart. One day, as Armand and Sana walked through the town square, they noticed a group of children playing near the fountain.
Sana knelt down to join them, listening to their stories, offering guidance, and sharing in their laughter. Armand watched, feeling a profound sense of pride. He realized that the girl the town had once called ugly had the ability to touch lives in ways he had never imagined. Her heart was not only radiant, it was transformative. Their home, though modest, became a place of warmth and welcome. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers felt comfortable visiting, drawn by the kindness and generosity that Armand and Sana offered.
Meals were shared, stories exchanged, and problems solved together. The couple's life was simple, yet rich in love, purpose, and meaning.
Armand often reflected on how much he had changed since the first days of their acquaintance. He had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances.
He had come to understand that true love was not instant or superficial. It was built on trust, respect, and a deep understanding of another person's heart. Sana had taught him these lessons simply by being herself, by living with integrity, and by showing unwavering compassion. Sana also saw the transformation in Armand. He had become more thoughtful, more caring, and more attuned to the needs of others. His respect for her had grown into a partnership rooted in mutual admiration and love. Together, they inspired not only each other but also the people around them, showing that a life built on kindness and understanding was far more meaningful than one based on appearances or social approval.
Over time, the couple became role models in the town.
Young people looked to them for guidance, families sought their advice, and the community began to celebrate their example of love, respect, and service. Armand and Sana's marriage proved that true beauty could not be judged by the eyes, that love could grow in unexpected ways, and that a heart of gold could change even the most skeptical minds. Years passed, and the bond between Armand and Sana only deepened.
They faced challenges as all couples do, but they faced them together, drawing strength from each other's support and wisdom. Their home was filled with laughter, learning, and the quiet satisfaction of a life lived with purpose. Armand often thought back to the first days when he had doubted, when the town's gossip had influenced his thoughts, and he marveled at how far he had come. He realized that marrying Sana had been one of the greatest blessings of his life, not because of any external beauty, but because of the remarkable heart she had shared with him and the world.
Sana, too, reflected on her journey.
She had endured judgment, whispers, and harsh labels, yet she had remained true to herself. Her patience, kindness, and strength had not only won the heart of Armand, but had transformed the way the town viewed her. She understood now that a life guided by integrity and compassion could overcome even the harshest challenges. Her happiness was no longer fragile or dependent on others' opinions. It was rooted in love, respect, and the life she had built alongside Armand.
Together, Arman and Sana continued to grow, each day discovering new ways to support and cherish each other.
They traveled to nearby villages to help those in need, organized community events to teach and inspire, and created a life where the heart mattered more than anything else. Their love story became a quiet legend in the town, a story not of superficial beauty or social expectation, but of understanding, patience, and the extraordinary power of a radiant heart. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset behind the hills, Arman took Sana's hand in his.
"I once thought I was making a sacrifice," he said softly. "But now I know I gained the most beautiful thing in life. Your heart, your love. It has changed me completely. I am grateful every day for you."
Sana smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun.
"And I am grateful for you, Arman," she replied. "For seeing me, for understanding me, and for walking this life with me. Together we have built something more meaningful than appearances could ever measure."
As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of pink and gold, they sat in quiet contentment, feeling the profound peace of a life lived with love, understanding, and purpose. The town around them had learned a valuable lesson as well, that beauty is not in the eyes but in the heart, and that love, guided by respect and kindness, can transform even the harshest judgments into admiration and joy.
Arman and Sana's journey, from doubt and hesitation to understanding and love, had reached its natural fulfillment. They had proven to themselves and to others that a heart full of kindness and generosity is far more powerful and beautiful than any external appearance. And in that quiet town, in a modest home filled with warmth and laughter, the two souls who had once been judged and underestimated found the happiness, respect, and love they truly deserved.